So I want you to know that if there's folks that didn't get a chance to hear this or weren't able to attend because I was out when we first were planning to do this, it will be recorded and folks can go onto our website and get the recording, and they'll be able to have the forms to go along with it. So welcome everybody to Screening Intakes and Guidelines. Hold on, I got something going on the screen here. For domestic violence programs, that's on. And I want to thank you guys for joining us again. I know we had already scheduled this and I had a family emergency that came up, and so I had to postpone. And now I'm here today, so I want to say thank you so much for having patience and coming back and joining us for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to learn more about screenings and intakes and guidelines. We also have ASL interpreters with us, so I am going to make sure I talk slowly so that everybody can get all the information that's needed. Again, we've got approximately about 51 people here so far. I've got a few people here to help with some notes if people have chats or comments that they want to toss out there. So there's a lot going on here, but we're going to try to get through this webinar so that when we're all done, you guys get to have lunch together. So I have Judy here who's going to support me in this webinar, and also Lee will be joining us to also help with some of the chats or questions that you guys might have during the webinar. I'm pretty sure there's going to be lots of questions, so I'm prepared for that. I wanted to just mention that this webinar is supported and funded by the Washington State Department of Social Health, so woohoo for their financial support and that, that they provide for us here at WSCADV. All right, so if you're listening, it's best to listen through your computer. I think most of you have already logged on, so some of this doesn't really pertain to you because it seems like you guys are experts and you already know how to get onto these webinars. Some of us, it takes us a little longer because we're not that techie, but obviously you guys know what you're doing because you're already signed on, so that's great. It has to be. Okay. And everyone is muted, so you can only hear my voice. Well, you can hear Judy and whoever else is in the room with me. So I wish that I could hear all of your voices because then it would be a wonderful moment to just have great conversation. But there's way too many of you, and it would get extremely complicated. So we're going to keep this muted, and we're going to ask you if you have questions to use the chat box. The question box. The question box. Apparently there's two boxes, and one is better than the other. So the question box is the one I want you to use. All right, so how to find the forms. Attached to your webinar, you will see a Word document or PDF that can be downloaded. Two things I want to mention. One is you can go to our website and look up resource shelter screening. There's like the whole thing right there in front of you. You can click on the guidelines, the forms and guidelines. A couple of things is that if you download the PDF, sometimes if you don't have the system to change those back into Word documents, it's kind of hard. You can't make changes to them. But you can also do the Word document, and then you can make changes to those. So not everyone here at the Coalition has the opportunity to have that tool on their computer, so we can't change all of our PDFs to Word documents. But I think you'll be able to use these as a tool, and you're going to want them in the Word form so you can adapt and adjust what's needed for each program. So, welcome. Who's here today? Obviously me, Deirdre Boylan. I'm the program coordinator for leadership here at the Coalition, and Lee Hoffheimer, who is not in our room at the moment, but she will be here. She is also one of our coordinators for, what is her title? She's a coordinator. She's a coordinator. She's a coordinator. And then we have Judy Chen. Hello. And we also have in the room Donovan Willetto, who is, do you want to introduce yourself? And then we have Becca, who is our tech person. So we've got several people here really helping out today on this webinar. The other thing I noticed is that we had so many people register. I just want to say shout out to all of our community and our partners with the WSCADV that signed up for this webinar. So far we've got 49 people, but originally we had like 208 folks like sign up for this webinar. Unfortunately, I did have to change the date, and that could have been why some folks are not able to be here today. But I think that obviously this information is critical to folks and in our programs, and people really want to know how to do their best when they're screening folks into their programs and doing intakes. And I think clearly it speaks to me and says that this is a needed opportunity for folks to learn a little more and get acquainted with how to help survivors when they're connecting and contacting our programs. So we all want to do our best when folks communicate with us and come to us for services, and I think this is just one of the ways that we'll be able to help survivors. So I want to welcome our interpreters. We have ASL interpreters today, and we have Spanish interpreters. So again, I'm going to remind myself to talk slow. If I can do that, and I'm sure folks here will remind me if I start talking too fast. So this is really exciting for me because I worked really hard on coming up with some of this information for the screening and intakes. And I do want you to know that it's a living document. So I kind of get to that in a minute, but I'm sure there's probably more things I could change or adjust or add. But I think your comments will be helpful as well. Can still hear you. I want to know if folks can still hear me. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. So it sounds like, okay. Yay, good. We were having a little bit of a...
Even all the way in Maui, we have one participant. Hi, Misty, who's calling in from Maui. Thank you for being here.
Wow.
And somebody also... okay, great. Okay. So
we've got advocates, we've got victim witness advocates, we've got mobile advocates, we've got many different programs that have registered to be on this call with us today. So some people are actually directly working in shelters, but they do have moments where they come in contact with folks who have been in a situation where domestic violence was involved. And so definitely they're here, folks are here to learn more, so I'm pretty excited about that. All right, so why is it important to have a great screening and intake form? Forms drive our first conversation with participants and survivors. And as you know, and this is in many places where we walk into places and folks, approach us with papers, forms, clipboards, questions, and that's kind of their first contact with us. And I think it's really something for us to think about when we have a busy schedule and someone comes to our program, and the first thing we want to know is ask them questions. And I really want folks to think about, can we look at that a different way? Especially the folks that are coming to our programs. Most of the time they're coming because an incident has just occurred, they're concerned for their safety, and approaching someone with forms is probably not the best first interaction. And so just thinking about how we collect information from folks, is it necessary to do that on the first moment you meet someone? And if it is, how can we make that survivor-centered? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does it feel like the person who's receiving this information? Those are some of the things that we should be thinking about when we're coming in contact with survivors who are coming to our program. Forms should send a clear message that everyone is welcome in your program. So oftentimes we start out with just questions. We like, oh, what's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? How many kids do you have? That's actually not very welcoming. So just thinking about how to make this look a little different so that folks are feeling connected when they come to our program. I mean, I think it's important for folks to feel like when they come to our programs, they want to share the information with us. It shouldn't be a one-way transition where they're just responding. They should want to come in and connect and feel comfortable to share information with us. Questions can be supportive or they can get in the way of process of how we get our information. Creating a trauma-informed, trusting relationship lets survivors drive the conversation, not the form. So again, we don't want the form to drive how we interact with folks coming to our program. We really want to build some sort of connection with folks. I want to say relationship, but you know, that can be, people can kind of misinterpret that information. But you want to make the situation comfortable enough for someone to be able to feel that they can talk with you and share with you. Sometimes we struggle with having the responsibility of screening in the unknown participant. I mean, I know that because I was an advocate at a shelter, and you know, I know a lot of you probably know this too.
And a shelter manager.
And a shelter manager.
And a community advocacy program manager.
Yes, yes, and a community.
So people don't want to bring in, are you saying people don't want to bring in somebody who like, ooh, I don't know if we want to bring her in?
Oh, sure. I mean, definitely I've been on a call where someone's called in, I answer the phone, and they're presenting me with all of these issues, and I'm like actually kind of freaked out because I'm like, I don't even know if we can serve her, and I don't know if I bring this person in, is everybody going to be pissed at me because I brought this person in and they've got so much drama and so much baggage.
Yes.
And so I'm feeling really overwhelmed on like, how can I best support this person? But maybe actually not even screen them in because God, it's going to be so much work, right? But I think really what that speaks to is me, I was really unprepared. I was unprepared for what someone, some of their stuff that they needed support on. And that just speaks to me as an advocate being unprepared to serve someone who was coming to our program. So I've been told I need to slow down, so I'm going to try to do that.
Let's just pause for a minute.
Let's pause for a minute. And, you know, really part of it is just connecting with folks and having them come into our program and allowing them to talk to us. It's not about us talking to them all the time. It's about them talking to us. All right. So what's hard about screening and intake? No one wants to get blamed for screening in the person that has caused the most drama. I mean, I'm sure we can all relate to that, right? Like, you're on duty, it's your turn, it's your time, you've got multiple things going on in your program, and you've got to screen this person in. You know that they're not going to show up till it's almost time for you to leave, which really means it's going to be on the next person's shift that they're going to have to deal with all this stuff. So it's really critical that you get as much information or the most important information that you think will be helpful, that the advocate that's coming on to take you after your shift will be able to support the person coming into the program. I mean, we have a fear of not knowing how to help survivors. And I think that's kind of what I was saying before, is when someone called our program and they presented lots of issues or concerns, sometimes I just wasn't really prepared to know if we would be able to help that person with all of what's going on in their life. And that's actually, I was really afraid. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to help them. And so, you know, what's the alternative? To say, no, we can't take you, or to say, yes, we can take you, and then the fear of failing. So it's key, I think, for us to recognize that folks that are going to come to our programs are going to come with a lot of stuff. And we got to be prepared for that. We got to be prepared that, you know, we might not be able to solve all of their problems or help them with everything, but let's be prepared to say, we'll try. We'll do our best. The other part of that is we actually don't know everything about each individual person, because most folks are not going to tell us everything over the phone. They don't know us. So why would they tell us everything about their lives over the phone? They're not going to. And they're not going to tell you when they show up on the first day. They might share some information, but they want to get to know you first. They want to know that this is a place where I can feel like I can share my personal information and trust that you're going to support me and help me in that process. So remember, you're not going to know everything about someone probably weeks in. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to know what's going on in a person's life so that you can actually help them with whatever's going on. Challenges of serving survivors with high needs. I mean, we all know that. We know that folks come to our programs, and it's not just about domestic violence. It could be about their housing. It could be about their finances. It could be about their health. It could be about their children. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. I mean, like, look at our own lives. Like, we come to work every day, and outside of our own lives, we've got stuff going on. We have got stuff going on. So if we were to set our own baggage on the table, we would have lots of bags, many different sizes, but we would all have our own bag, right? So, and who are you going to share your information with? How do you feel about sharing your personal information with other people? So now think of that in a way where we've got folks calling us, coming into our programs, and what do? We expect them to just put everything on the table. It's not going to happen. It's going to take time for that, and it's going to take time for you to build a relationship, to be able to build that trust so that they can provide you with all that's going on in their lives so that they can get the help they need. There's a lot of pressure, I think, and I think this is going to be a challenging conversation a little bit about pressure to screen folks out. And, you know, I don't think it's in our intention to screen folks out of our programs, but sometimes when folks present a lot of barriers and issues to them being successful, it can be fearful to us, and we can think of, we do things somewhat in a way where we end up screening folks out. So and some of that could look like, this person stayed at our shelter before and it really didn't work out. Or the abuse that happened to me was 6 months ago or a year ago. And someone might feel like it's not relevant right now, and we can't serve that person. Someone just got out of jail. I've heard that folks feel like, well, if they just got out of jail, they actually don't need shelter. This isn't the place for them. Believe it or not, that's probably what they need, is shelter. Survivors who are court-ordered to our programs, a lot of times they don't really want to be there. But also it's our opportunity to connect with them and share with them all the resources and services that we have. Now, granted, it's their choice. They don't have to take the information, but at least we're offering it. And then I wrote here, survivor, this is funny because this actually happened to me, where we had a woman who came in with all her kids, dogs, high needs, and she came with this huge box of legal documents that were not even, they weren't like in folders. They were just papers tossed into a box, and was like, I really need help with all of this. And, you know, how do you juggle? That is like a juggling act right there. You've got dogs, you've got high needs, you've got kids, you've got legal stuff happening, and, you know, you're looking at yourself like, I, as an advocate alone, cannot actually help this individual with all of these things. And that's really where your team comes in to support you. That's where the other advocates come to support you and help you help this survivor with many of her needs that are happening with her. So one of the things that I want to say is what's hard about this is that oftentimes we feel like we're doing it alone, and we shouldn't feel like we're doing it alone. You've got your coworkers, you've got your team. This is something that you should be talking about with one another, figure out how we can support high needs folks that are coming to our programs, so we're not scared to do it. We're not screening people out, but we're finding ways to bring them in, and it's survivor-centered. Reminders. These forms are a template so that you can use these forms. The forms that you'll get, you can definitely use them. You can print them, use them in your programs. I know one of the things that's important is keep in mind that oftentimes we take forms and we just add to them because we think, oh,
it never happens. It's like shelter rules, right?
Right.
Okay, now we have another rule because of somebody threw the TV down the stairs. So now we have a rule that you can't
throw TVs down the stairs. There was one rule that you had to wear socks all the time in a program. Not shoes, socks.
Socks.
Yeah, that came from, there were nails that were left from some construction. I'm not really sure how the socks would create a barrier, but there was this thing about socks needing to be worn at all times. So I just thought that was kind of funny. But those things just stick around.
Socks.
Just socks. Not even shoes, just socks.
Okay. So what you created here are templates
Yes.
for people to use.
Yep.
And we're going to keep on saying, please don't add a lot of questions.
Right.
That's the whole point.
Right.
And then you have these really great guidelines that go with them, right?
Right. Right.
It's like the tip sheets.
Right. And I think that the key is that each program is a little different. So you're going to have to add in your nuance to that. And that's okay. But keep in mind, it's really not supposed to be a checklist. It's not supposed to be this thing where you want more questions. And if you feel like your forms are driven by funders, that's a question that you can sit down and have a conversation with other folks about. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But
can they come and talk to you about that, Dee?
They can definitely come and talk to me. I love talking about that. I love talking about forms. I love talking about not adding stuff to forms. I call it crap to forms because, it's just crap. A lot of times it's just crap.
And we're not saying that on DSHS time. That was a privately funded moment.
Oh. Well, I just think it's funny that how we can come up with more and more questions. And I think, we don't really need to do that. I think it's important to keep in mind that when we go places and people are asking us tons of questions, how it makes us feel. And I know that there have been times when people have asked you questions where you're like, I don't even understand the relevance of the question. So if you decide to add to the forms, think about what's the relevance to the question. I mean, obviously, folks that are coming to our program are going to feel compelled that they have to answer it because we hold the key, right? We hold everything, and they're going to feel obligated to answer our questions. And folks shouldn't feel that way. So be sensitive, be thoughtful when you're thinking about adding more to these forms, and think about if it was you or a family member or your sister or your aunt or your mother that was coming in to fill out this form, how would they feel? How would you want that experience to be for them?
Well, Dee, I'm thinking about my own experiences that sometimes when I'm asked a really personal question, I was just at the doctor's office this morning, and sometimes when I'm asked a really personal question, I might not give the full answer. Because I was filling out this form. It's a new form, mm-hmm. and they're screening for if you're suicidal or depressed, mm-hmm. right? So there's all these questions that are along those lines, mm-hmm. and then mm-hmm. one of the questions is, it's just some person at the front desk who's passing this out, and then I'm supposed to give it back to them. So I'm like, who are you, right? Right. And one of the questions is, have you been extremely tired in the last 2 weeks? And I was like, if I answer yes, right. Are they going to screen me in for some kind of depression or suicidal right. intervention, right? But I was like, have any of you been extremely tired in the last 2 weeks? Yes, right? And right. the other one was, do you ever have trouble sleeping? Well, yeah, right? So it's one of those things with I had to pause and say, am I going to tell the truth or not? Right. Well, I mean, we all lie, right? Because if you look at your driver's license, it says weight. Hypothetically speaking. I mean, technically, we all lie, right? If it says height, weight, whatever, it just doesn't, when we go to the doctor and they say, I want to take your weight, we're like, what for? It was when you had it the last time I was here. Just when you think about that, you just... How often do you exercise? That was the other one. I was like, right. Well, right. Do you want the truth? Right. So, I think when you think about questions, one of the ones that always strikes me as is interesting is when forms will ask, when was your last drink? Or do you drink during the week and how many do you drink, right? And we can also be very judgmental when people respond mm-hmm. to that, mm-hmm. depending on our level, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about questions that you're going to put on forms, consider all factors, right? Just really consider what they're going to share with you, because they might actually just lie. And then we don't have that trusting relationship. You don't have the trusting relationship. Yeah. So. Yeah. Because then, yeah. Here, go ahead. Lee is here, and Lee has a thought.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Did everyone get the sample forms, or are we following up with sample forms?
The forms are attached to the webinar, and they all can also go to our website.
Which you're going to show on the screen in just a moment.
Yes.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Oops. Dun, dun, dun.
All right. So the tools that we have our shelter screening forms, the template. We had shelter guidelines, intake form guidelines, the template, and then guidelines for. So for every template that you have, there's a guideline that goes along with it, and it kind of explains why we ask the questions, how you can approach the question. These are just my thoughts. They, you know, when I give an example of how you can ask a question, it doesn't mean you have to ask the question that exact way. It just kind of gives you a guide on how you can ask the question, and you can practice with other advocates on coming up with ways to ask questions to folks. So
you're just sharing with people what we have for them.
Right. So non-residential screening form, non-residential screening guidelines, and then the intake forms.
It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff here. So
great.
Yeah, I definitely take a look at it, and we're going to keep going here. All right. So this first form is the shelter and sheltering screening form. And I think the thing that I really wanted to get across with this form was that it's the most important thing that you're going to do when someone is contacting your program is you're going to listen. And oftentimes we as advocates, and I say we because I was an advocate, your plate is full when you're in the office. Oftentimes we are not afforded the ability to just do one task. In our programs, we do many tasks. So whether we're answering a call, a crisis call, or at the same time multitasking, getting someone aspirin or letting someone into the front door, sometimes we're just multitasking. But what I want to ask folks is to really, when you're going to sit down and do a screening with someone, is to listen. Really listen to what that person is talking about and what they're asking for. Because sometimes shelter is not what they're asking for. They might be in their moment of crisis, they might be saying, yes, I want shelter. But maybe think about some other options for them. Do they have family or friends? Are there other options for them? Could we change a lock? But just listening and listening and listening. You can always say, can you tell me a little bit more? Can you share with me a little bit more? You want to make sure that that person is in a place where they can actually have a conversation. If they're scared or feel uncomfortable, you might want to find out if they can go to a different place and have that conversation. Another part that I thought was important was supporting the person who's calling. And you can say things like, I'm so glad you called us today. Thank you for thinking about us when you made this call. I'm really glad you took this step. We're here to support you. Let's just have more conversation. I want to really listen to what's going on with you so I can make sure I'm providing the right services. And then provide. Here's your opportunity to really share like what your program offers. Again, I want to just go back to one thing first, is that when you answer the phone, and I think I bring this up a little later, when you answer the phone, one of the things I think that's important is to say who you are. So you might want to just say the name of your program, and you might want to be clear, like, this is a domestic violence program. And I don't know about any of you, but I used to work for New Beginnings. And New Beginnings was actually a poodle place, a hair salon, a daycare, a church.
So it's a pretty common name.
It's a pretty common name. And believe it or not, there were many of them located in the United States. So sometimes people just got a number and they called it, and they really weren't sure what they were calling or who they were calling. So if you're clear when folks call, that actually helps guide the conversation. And so now you're at the provide part. So you're providing for folks, and that can look like, let's say, I want to let you know that our program is a shelter. And what we provide is overnight stays. We provide up to 28 days or however many days it is you provide. You want to give them a little bit of information, like we do support groups, it is communal living. You want to be very upfront with the person to let them know if this is a possibility that they're going to come to their program, that they know what they're walking into.
So we're going to get to that.
We're going to get to that. So it's about making sure that you provide what your services you're sharing what your services offer so that they're clear about the conversation that you're having. Oops. We're going to look at some questions here as we move along.
So Dee, is there going to be a time for questions?
Yes, there's going to be a time for questions. We have a little slot where it's going to be, give me all your burning questions.
So do you want people to go ahead and write in questions?
People can go ahead and write in questions if you have questions, no problem. I might not get to them right away, but I will get to them.
I'm organizing it, so when you stop, let me know when I'm leaving.
Okay, and so Lee just mentioned that she's going ahead and organizing some of the questions, and then when I do a pause, we're going to answer some of those questions. So go ahead and type in your questions if you have some. So listen for what callers need so that you can put their priorities first. Do you have any shelter space? I need shelter, and I know for me as an advocate, when I was an advocate, when I would answer the phone, I would say New Beginnings, folks would say, I need shelter. Do you have shelter space? Which, that oftentimes I would just say, okay, like, let me see if we have shelter space, and we would go from there. But now what I'm really asking people is to say, tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Because oftentimes folks think that they just need shelter, when there could be a possibility that there are other things that you could provide for them aside from shelter. However, this might not be the thing they need, so tell me more about your housing situation. And I think that's kind of new language for folks.
Yeah, this is a big shift.
It's a big shift. So thinking about, like, what is your housing situation? Tell me more about that. There are programs right now that are really supporting folks getting into other options versus shelter. So that is something that your program can have a discussion on. We can talk more a little bit about that if you want to at a different time. But really thinking about, is shelter the end deal? Is this really what people need? And maybe they need something different. And let's entertain that thought. What could that look like? It could look like, well, I really just need first month's rent or get into a place, or I really need someone to help me locate apartments in my area,
or getting some more security.
Getting more security
for the apartment,
right,
or for the house. Or figuring out how to negotiate with the landlord a lower payment for a couple months.
Right.
Those kinds of things. So that, or figuring out how to relocate somewhere else, locally or out of state.
Right.
Without having to become homeless.
Correct.
And this is, I mean, not everybody. That's one of the things is that a lot of times, because people watch, Lifetime television, they know that one of the services that often our programs provide is shelter. But a lot of times people, it turns out they don't know that we do all this other great stuff.
Correct.
And that could be really helpful for them without having to become homeless.
Right. And keep in mind that on Lifetime television, often when a woman is looking for shelter, they always have a space available. Miraculously, right?
Yeah, I wish that could work out. Like, that's going to be our backup.
Right. And so folks can be extremely frustrated when they contact our programs and we don't have space. So really thinking about other ways to serve folks rather than just saying, okay, shelter is the answer, because maybe there are other resources for them. So support. Have you ever had this? Okay, so support. Proactively say to everyone, not just people who are different than your usual participants, a welcoming statement. So, like I said before, when you answer your phone, you can have some sort of a welcoming statement that is helpful. Our program welcomes everyone. We open our doors to people from different cultures, races, and ethnicities, different religions, so on and so forth. And I think that's important because I can recall, and you can probably recall, I don't know, but I had someone, after I explained to them what we provided, and when I said communal living and folks from different walks of life, they actually said, no, never mind. Right? I mean, it's their choice, right? So I am so glad that I was clear about what they were going to experience when they came into our program, that they were able to make a decision that wasn't going to work for them. Communal living was not going to work for them. Being in a room with folks that might be different from them was not going to work. And at least we established that early on in the conversation, where this person could consider the option and decide whether this was a yes or no option. right? So folks can say, you know, I'm sorry, I don't want this service. It doesn't mean that they still don't want resources, information, or other options. It just means that this potential option, maybe coming to a shelter, is not for them. And that's okay. At least,
or the services.
Or the services. And that's okay. At least they know, you know, up front. Everyone has the right to make their decision. And as long as we are forthcoming with the reality of shelter living, I think that's what's most important. So,
well, you know, the other thing that occurs to me with how you phrase this is that this is also one of the ways that we signal to people, you know, back to what you were saying a few minutes ago about, you know, people are not going to reveal everything about their personal lives to someone they don't know on the phone, right? This is showing me that, like, there's a way to signal, especially for LGBTQ folks, you're welcome here. You can come here. This is not just for women who are born women, and also to people who might have a disability, you know, to say, or who are struggling with, you know, different kind of problems, to know that, like, oh, this is a welcoming space. It's kind of like how we put our posters up, right? But when we're talking to people on the phone, they can't see our welcoming posters.
Right, right. That's true. That's true. They don't know what they're walking into. They don't know what they should expect. And I think that's our opportunity to share that information of what to expect when you come to our program. And that should be done, I think, I don't know, pretty early on for folks. You know, they're not providing you with tons and tons of information, and then you share who you are and what you are, and then they're like, well, what? This doesn't work.
And there's ways to negotiate around that, right? Like, everybody's here who is here getting services. It's having an emergency. Can we make a deal, like, for the next 12 hours that, or 24 hours that, you know, we'll see if this can work for you.
Do you think we should answer some questions?
Yeah, should we pause and answer questions?
So we're going to take a quick pause and look at some of your questions and see if we can respond to some of your questions.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Pause. I'm just not sure. Are you going to be doing this, or am I doing this, or do I? I don't know if we're duplicating questions.
You can do it.
It's all good.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
How about you
two
figure that out, and I'm going to answer a technical question.
Okay.
Somebody asked, when is the Bill Tamayo training with that's about sexual assault and sexual harassment against immigrants in the workplace? So one of the things that we know is that immigrant and refugee folks, who, especially people who don't have legal status, can be very vulnerable to being harassed or abused at work. For example, people who are doing farm work. So Bill Tamayo, who's the regional director for the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. I think I got something like that. The EEOC. He's coming out. It's going to be great. June 12th in Ellensburg. And you can register for that on our website. That's my commercial.
That was a commercial break. Okay, so I have a question here that says how to handle questions that the funder requires that seem intrusive by design. The funder requires the program to screen every client. Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously.
Around, like, mental health, substance abuse.
It doesn't exactly say what the question is, but I think one of the things that I was talking about earlier is having conversations about what questions you're going to ask to folks. And it is okay to go back to funders and have a conversation with them and ask about how some of these questions might be uncomfortable or intrusive to folks. And can you negotiate different questions? Can you negotiate asking questions that you think would be helpful or supporting? If the questions don't feel like they're supporting folks, and maybe that's the conversation you can have with some of your funders. And how to do that really is to, as a team, I think, and with management, is to sit down and have a conversation about what's uncomfortable about the form, what questions are uncomfortable, which ones are you feeling like you really would like to eliminate, and then that's where your director would go back and start having that conversation with one of the funders. I honestly believe that we can build relationships with our funders. Oftentimes our funders are not connected to how we do our work. They know we do our work. They just don't know how it's all done. So I think by having those conversations about what's uncomfortable, what's not supporting, what's not survivor driven, maybe they can hear some of that conversation and you can come to an agreement on what will be asked and what can be eliminated. And Judy's writing something. So Judy is saying that you can be successful in challenging.
Were you?
Oh yeah, I was successful. What I learned is that actually when I started having these conversations, and the director would have conversations with funders, really actually they had no idea what was making us uncomfortable. They didn't know.
It always feels like a plot.
Right. Right. I mean, I thought that they were like really new and like they were driving this, but they actually did not know. And so when we started having conversations, and really what the bottom line is, they had a bottom line, and all we had to figure out was how to get to the bottom line together, but do it in a way that was survivor driven. And that's really what made the changes in a lot of our forums. It's like we actually knew what we were doing. We knew what was most comfortable for folks, but we had to have that conversation with them. Otherwise, they had no idea, none whatsoever. So
awesome. Thanks.
Go ahead. Want me to I can read out a couple more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lee's going to read a few more.
You need to be over here.
Okay. What are your thoughts around having advocates fill out forms for clients through conversation rather than handing them a form to fill out?
Well, I think that's actually a really good question, because I am on the fence with both of those. So one, I think you would never hand someone a form when they walk into your program and just say, here, fill this out. I think you have to establish a relationship, a connection with folks, and I'm going to kind of go into that a little bit about when people come into your program. But I think you have to build some sort of connection. They want to know who you are. They want to know what you offer. I would never just give someone a form. I mean, I know that happens to us when we go to the doctor and they say, here's a clipboard, fill this out. And we do it, which is really interesting, right? But think about how that makes you feel. And then you still wait, how long? Like 30 minutes? And then if you're late, then you get billed, right? But I think when folks come to our programs, it's not about giving them forms to fill out. It's about a connection. And honestly, this is my truth, is that whether they fill out anything on their first day, I say no. I say you talk to folks, you walk them around your program, you engage with them, maybe you set an appointment, they come back and do paperwork then. Why is it? Why? Why do we
This is a radical view, Dee.
It is radical, but I really think that we have to allow folks the option to participate in our program. That's why they're participants, right? Because they get the choice to participate in our program. That's how it should be, right? So I think if you
sounds really trauma informed. Well, because it sounds like letting someone settle in and then making the space for conversation.
Right.
So is that how you did it when you were, because you were working at a shelter program for, what, 20 years?
Yes. But you have to remember, years ago, I wasn't this smart. And two, you learn from your mistakes, right? So when you learn from your mistakes, I can talk about all my mistakes and how that could have been traumatizing to folks, and how what I learned is, let's do it this way because it actually works better, right? Okay. So yeah, I've traumatized a lot of people. But I learned from that. I mean, like literally, you can see the look on people's faces when you ask them questions that are intrusive. And they pause. It's
that freeze up look. Right?
It's the freeze up look.
Yeah.
And you know what they're freezing about? Is I don't trust you enough to actually share with you that information. Yeah. And I'm pausing to determine whether or not, what is it going to cost me if I don't share that information. Okay. Right? So, I think that, one, you should just allow folks to determine whether or not you're going to fill out paperwork that day. They can just walk around, share, talk, whatever, listen, whatever it takes. But I do think that some information should be collected in a dialogue. So like you might be asking some questions, you might take a few notes. I think if you're going to actually give something that's on a clipboard, I don't have a problem with that, but it should be questions that are like if there's one thing that you might need, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it could be something like, are there other things that we didn't get a chance to communicate about that you really need support around? You know.
So those are some great key phrases.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, those are some things that you can, put on a questionnaire that people can fill out later.
Well, just going back to what you were saying about the substance abuse questions,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about all the teachings from Patty Bland, when she would say, just make a statement that's like a welcoming statement that's normalizing.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of the people I talk to, are really, dealing with a lot of stress, and one of the ways that a lot of times people who come here have been dealing with stress is, maybe having, a glass of wine or, a bottle of wine every night. How much if you ever want to talk to me about that, this is a place where you can talk. If that's bothering you, you can talk to me about it. Or the same thing around the sexual abuse questions.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people who I talk to have been dealing with unwanted sex in their lives, and that's something you ever want to talk about. Everybody here is prepared to talk about that, and I just want you to know that that's really, that's not something that you need to be embarrassed about. Right? If you want to talk to me.
Right. And then Lee had another question, or someone asked another question about, what is my suggestion on approaching a caller that gives multiple stories? So sometimes callers do call. It is hard to track and follow their conversation at times. What I do is I keep in mind that callers often, there might be a lot going on for them. They're not actually in sync with the story that they're telling. It doesn't mean they don't need your service. It doesn't mean that they're not experiencing something in their life that is traumatizing. It just means that they're just having a hard time tracking. Now, I believe, too, that you can bring folks into your program and still service them, and that inconsistency can still happen. It still doesn't mean they don't need your service. It just means that they're not great at sharing the information in a succinct way that we think is helpful. So, but folks who come to us for needs and support can the way they provide it to us can look very different in multiple ways, and that's okay. We have to be able to sort of sift through that process and figure out. Lots of folks come to us who are traumatized. They've experienced a lot of trauma, and the way they deliver that information, I think just it's the way they provide it.
And trauma, one of the things that we learn about trauma is that trauma makes our stories not linear. It makes it not go in a straight line, right? Because it's something about what happens to the brain, and especially for people who've experienced multiple trauma from childhood throughout their lifetime, that because I'm showing how much I don't know about trauma in the brain, but we do have a training coming up on this. There's something about what happens in terms of where those traumatic memories go into the brain, that when people are sharing, it just doesn't sync up. And as advocates, one of the things that's super, super important for us to be able to stand by people's, right by their side and help them navigate systems is that can come across as lying. Mm-hmm. It can come across as lying or not telling the truth when people who have experienced a lot of trauma are interacting with law enforcement or the courts or other social services, and we can help those other providers understand that people's stories aren't going to line up, and we can help them learn more about trauma rather than this person is crazy or this person is lying, because that's the stereotype, right? Mm-hmm. That's the stereotype about traumatized survivors.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, so great question. Thanks so much.
So we have another question. What would be the difference between serving immigrants and foreigners who are in the U.S. on green cards and the domestic violence and sexual assault program?
Okay, so this is a really great question. I want to just say we'd be super happy to follow up with the person who asked this. Thank you so much for asking this important question. The short answer is that we're providing services to everyone.
Right.
We do not do any kind of different services for folks or less services or screen people out. And we're super aware that for people who have immigration status that's not super stable, that creates an added layer of danger and insecurity and vulnerability to abuse for them. And so that's something as advocates that we get to learn more about immigration status and immigration options, get training on that so that we can really support people, because we know that abusers use immigration status as a very harsh weapon against survivors all the time to threaten that they will be deported and they'll lose their children. So that's a wonderful way for us to really be with people when they're afraid in this moment, especially now.
That was a great response. I think that actually sums up everything everything I was going to say. I mean, bottom line is you still screen people in. You can't make any judgments or anything until folks are with you, and then you determine how to best serve folks once they're with you. So you just want to screen folks in.
So do you want to take one more, or do you want to keep going, and then we'll get to more questions?
We'll keep going.
Okay.
So consider non-shelter housing options. Some programs currently offer financial assistance to folks. This helps survivors from moving from place to place. So options to consider, I mean, they could move in with relatives, move to another apartment. This is one thing that we used to try to really help folks do, is people wanted to move, but they didn't want to move far, whether it was because their children were in a particular school district or they just had too much stuff. And we would negotiate with landlords to get them to move to like the north end of the complex or the south end of the complex into a different unit, to just provide some distance and some time that that person would not know exactly where they moved to. So we would try to negotiate that with their abuser would not know where they were. And we would try to negotiate that with the landlords, and it worked. It definitely worked. Now we know that there's a housing crisis and there's not always these empty apartments sitting around. So it could take time, but remember, keep in mind that's an option as well. And they might need alarms or something like that, or door locks, additional door locks that might be helpful. The other thing I just want to talk about very quickly is this radical thought about getting to know your neighbors. I think sometimes we forget to talk to our participants and ask them to get to know their neighbors. And sometimes their neighbors might be able to help them if there's a crisis. So it could potentially be that you want your neighbor to call 911 if this particular person shows up on your doorstep, or you want your neighbor to check on you if your porch light has been out for 3 days. So sometimes, you know, we don't talk about our participants getting to know our neighbors, but I think it's important that we know the environment around us, our participants know the environment around them, so that they can connect with their community and their neighbors to know how to utilize that in their lives. So, I mean, I know that some of us do that personally, but I think it's something that we often don't talk about with our participants. It's about how to connect with their communities and their neighbors. So screening guidelines. So this is one of the forms that it's kind of the guideline that goes along with the screening. And when a caller contacts your program, the first thing you should ask is, are you in danger? Because you want to know that person might not be able to actually have the conversation with you if they're in fear of their life. If they're afraid, they're not going to be able to actually have a conversation with you. So what could that look like? If you're asking them, are they in danger? For example, is an abusive person in the home? Are they next to you? You know, is the caller having a difficult time speaking freely? If so, you know, now's the time to find and offer support. So you can ask that person, are you interested in helping me help you call 911? It doesn't happen often. It has happened, but it could be an option. Can I make the call for you? So maybe that person is actually trying to contact someone else. Maybe you can call that person for them. You can ask them, can you go someplace else safe to have this conversation? And is there anyone that's near you that you could possibly get and bring over to help you stay safe while we are on the phone? So you can ask these questions to people who are calling your program. The reason why I bring this up is because I definitely have had in the past callers who've called and they're just kind of silent. And a lot of times it's because the abusive partner is in the room or in the same household. And so they're afraid, but they didn't want to call 911. So they called our number.
Because they know that the police will come if they call.
They know the police will come. And so I've just kind of walked them through and just said things like, our program is domestic violence services. This is what we offer. Is this the right number that you are meaning to call? I know you can't talk with me right now, but you can just say yes or no. I had one woman who just said, and and we kind of got through our conversation, and I let her know that there are resources. She could go to a firehouse or a hospital. She could call from anywhere if she needed those resources or help.
Yes.
So,
I was just talking to someone a couple weeks ago who her abuser would not let her out of his sight, and they made a plan with the advocate for an advocate to meet her in the women's bathroom at church.
Oh yeah,
that's how they did it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So there's you all are just so creative.
Yeah.
And I want to just thank you for the important work that you're doing. And you had also mentioned earlier when you and I were talking about how you can also arrange not just for 911, but you could even have a cab sent out to pick someone up.
Right. I mean, I think that comes up somewhere, but talking about how you can provide transportation to someone, you can say, look, if you can go to one of the things I ask is, tell me what community you're in. And then we can figure out what neighborhood you're in. And we can say, okay, in that neighborhood, there's a community center, or there's a church, or there's a blah, blah, blah. If you get there, call us and we can cab you. Or I can tell you how you can catch the bus from this area. So trying to have that conversation to give them the most options. They don't have to take them, but at least you're offering the options and they can make some decisions based on that.
Yeah, they might do it a month from now.
And they could call back, right? So scripted questions and questions to cover.
So we're just pointing out that there's on your form on this page, you can see it. Maybe I'll move this little clicker around. You could see it.
Yeah.
Did you cover this already?
No.
Okay. So there's do you want to speak to this?
Yeah. So basically, what you saw before was a screening, and here are the guidelines to that. And so some of the things that you can say are you safe right now? So that's just one of the phrases that I came up with, which all of us usually say that phrase. You can pick whatever phrase you want. This is just an example. And then you can also say, we can provide bilingual advocate interpreters for this call. So keep in mind that some folks that are calling your program, their English may be limited, and you assume that they're understanding everything you're saying, but maybe they're not. So you should always offer the option to have an interpreter on the call so that nothing gets lost in translation, and that you are on equal footing in understanding what services are being offered and what they need, and how you can best provide that.
So, for example, a lot of times people who are limited English speaking have work English, right? People have the English words that go with work, with the job, but they might not have the words that go with what's happening in their relationship, and especially the words that have to do with body parts and violence, and especially women's, anything to do with sexual violence, that those words, or sexual organs, that people just don't have those words in English, right? And people who are native English speakers sometimes don't have all those words.
Right, or feel uncomfortable saying the words. Right. Yeah, and I think that's really about the guidelines is helping you have language, but helping you being able to be comfortable when having conversations with people. Because if you're uncomfortable having the conversations, that's something that you have to work at, practice, get over, because it's going to happen, and you're going to need to be able to be comfortable having these conversations over the phone.
So just to point out, Dee, so the way that you've organized these guidelines is that the left column are the scripted questions.
Correct.
Right? And then the right column, what's over here?
That is sort of the guide. So it's kind of like, if the caller is bilingual or limited English speaking, follow your program's procedures to offer interpreter services. And you could say, we can provide a bilingual advocate. So actually just knowing how that's going to roll out is best. So this should prompt you on how to have those conversations with folks. These are prompts to help you and guide you having conversations. This is something that you actually should be practicing before you connect with someone. This shouldn't be anything new. You shouldn't be reading this verbatim. This should be sort of kind of set in your process of connecting with folks.
So just to back up for a second,
Mm-hmm.
so the forms that we saw a few minutes ago, oops, where'd they go? This is the form, right?
Mm-hmm.
The template. And then everything on this template form is also listed in the guidelines, right?
Correct. So they pair up, they match up. So your form will match up with the guideline. With every question that is on the template,
it's kind of like a cheat sheet.
It's like a cheat sheet. So when you're looking at your guideline, it's the cheat sheet to the intake. It's the cheat sheet to the screening. I almost said a bad word. And that was my whole point, is that I didn't want to give you a new form without actually sharing with you on how to have the conversation that goes along with it. Because we can all have forms and we can all have questions to ask. But if you are not connecting with someone in a way that's survivor-centered, it's just going to be a question. And it can also come across insensitive. So, and where people might not want to respond to your question. So it's really about how you deliver and what that could look like. And here are some options for you in the guidelines.
Okay, that's awesome.
Thank you for pointing that out.
I don't know about you all, but I'm excited to have guidelines because I get nervous with the calls.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we still all get a little nervous because, you just don't know what's going to happen next. So listening for what the caller is experiencing, that prompted the call today. And I've kind of talked a little bit about this. So what are the urgent needs that have surfaced? That's kind of what you want to know. Like, what is going on with the caller right now that you want to help them with? So what's going on with them? How long has it been going on? Just so you can get an understanding. Because it has been going on for a really long time, and this is the first time they're reaching out. They could be very scared. And safety and well-being. What are their concerns for themselves, children, and others? So really listening to what's going on in the experience that they're going through.
The thing I like about how you frame this of what's happening today is sometimes when people call, I find that I can't track what they're saying, and asking people what's has led you to make the call today, helps people organize their thoughts.
Right.
Because trauma is traumatizing.
Right. And it could be that today is the day that I had an appointment and I made it here and I could use the phone. Right? It could be, I'm at my child's school and this is the only opportunity that I have freedom to speak, and I only come up here once a month, right? So it could be that you want to know what prompted that call.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm only allowed to come out here once a month, and today's the day.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if the caller discloses little or nothing? And this is kind of what I was talking about before, that if they're not talking and they're not sharing with you, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't need your service. It just means that they're trying to figure out how to connect with you. They might be minimizing the abuse, which is normal. Again, it's all about sharing personal information. They might have very little trust. They might not be able to speak freely. So some tips that you could say to folks: I'm sorry, could you repeat the last sentence? I'm a little unclear about the sequence of events. Can you share with me again your major concerns at this time? Listening, I think, is really critical, and you can pick up on a person when you ask them to share what's going on and you're just listening, you can really find out what's going on with someone. If you say, can you share a little bit more, or can you tell me what prompted you to call, like we were just saying. Oftentimes, people just don't know what they're calling for. If there's silence, you might want to just offer the opportunity to share what you offer. And you can say, we have support groups here. We have legal advocates, children's advocates. Does any of this sound like it would be helpful to you? So if they're really quiet, you can just offer some of the services that you provide, and maybe that might start a little bit more of the conversation. Some question?
Got it.
So screening in versus screening out. This is huge for me because really when I worked on doing screenings and intakes, it really honestly came down to some forms and some of the ways that we connect with folks. If they hit particular buttons, folks get screened out. And then some others get screened in if they hit other buttons. So it's, it's not, I want to say that it's not intentional. It's just kind of the way.
We're all good people.
We are all good
doing
people.
Doing this hard job.
And it's just kind of the way the ship has sailed, right? It's like this work is hard work. It's hard work. People are coming to us with lots and lots of stuff that's going on in their lives, some challenging, some not so challenging, but they really are looking to us for help. And how are they going to like sort all of this through? And we are the ones who can help with some of that. Now, I want to be clear. We can't help everyone with everything. And you can't pretend that you can help everyone with everything. So it's very important for us to be clear of what we can provide, how we support folks, and what that looks like. Because they might need a referral. And you can say, you know what, we don't provide that in our program. However, we do have some resources and I can refer you. So being clear about what you provide. Survivor-driven advocacy versus agency-driven advocacy. What does the survivor need instead of, is the caller a good fit for, I love that, right? Instead of, is the caller a good fit for our agency? Just think about that. Like, just pause. Let's just pause right there. Survivor-driven advocacy versus agency-driven advocacy. And I think a lot of us are in the place of agency-driven advocacy.
I was.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, still am.
If you don't really, I guess I'm assuming folks really know what I'm saying. And what I'm saying by that is if your forms are driven based on, I need to know this, and this, not how can I best provide services for this person, then just think about what that feels like. These forms are guides for you to understand the survivor's needs today. So you're not going to solve all that person's problems on the first phone call. It's going to happen over time, and it's going to take time. So just keep that in mind. So tips for screening. Start the conversation. Identify survivors' priorities. Identify risks. The screening process should lead with intention. Really, it should lead with it. Provide safety and advocacy services for individuals experiencing a range of abusive tactics from their partner. Screening forms, everyone listen to this, screening forms should be brief. Isn't that a novelty? Right? Because honestly, and maybe this requires folks to sort of practice this out, like how long does it actually take you to do a screening? How many questions are there that it's going to require that? How long is this going to take? That's something to think about. I mean, I have to think about, I'm providing you information. I've got 2 hours to squeeze it in. And I'm like, okay.
Is this the screening or the intake, though?
This is the screening.
This is the screening. Okay.
Right. So you got to figure out how much time and how many questions you have, because folks get tired. Folks are like, am I in or am I out? Like, we've been on the phone for an hour now, and you're going to ask me to call you back. Is that really necessary? So just thinking about what your screening looks like. So again, they should be brief, include staff introductions and prompts, framing.
Staff instructions.
Staff instructions. Did I say that?
You said introduction.
Oh, staff instructions. And just thinking about like what does the caller need to know at this point? Let's see. Anything else? What am I leaving off?
Just the idea of that the survivor is the one who has the best understanding of their risks that they're facing, and sometimes people, when they describe the danger or the violence that they've experienced, we're not always catching what it is that's so why that's so threatening to them. And leaning towards the side of believing that it is threatening to them is pretty important, because just like you were saying, sometimes people don't reveal everything that's happened, particularly when they're just on the phone for the first time with us.
Right. And also acknowledging that folks have kids, and that's a huge priority for them, and their safety of their children. And the other thing is pets. I mean, people are really want to know about their pets. How am I going to keep my pets safe? Do you take pets in your program? I know that's been a hot topic over the last couple of years, but definitely people make the decision whether to leave based on whether they can bring their children and their pets, right?
Okay. Ready for that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to pause here for a minute and take some more questions?
Let's take some questions.
Okay. So one of the questions was, how do we accommodate transgender folks or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning survivors on the forums? So how do you address having forums that are not just for women-born women?
So some of that conversation should never actually come up in a screening, because that's just
Tell me more.
You're just on the phone, and I don't think you need to know at this point, folks, sexuality. I don't think that's necessary. Now, unless you have communal living, you're going to mention that you have communal living shelter, and you want to ask, does this pose any problems for you? And then that conversation might come up. Granted, you might not know anything until that person shows up, and then you have that conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't serve them. It means that you have to figure out how your program is going to accommodate someone who's coming to your program that might not want to share a room with someone. If you have individual rooms, I think that could work out. That's fine. A lot of folks use...
Hopefully we're not putting people in rooms that don't know each other.
Well, some programs do still have... Some programs still do have...
That's a tough one.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, it really... So, one of the things... is that we're already, just to be clear, we're all of our programs are already required and hopefully are doing services for people of all genders. Mm-hmm. So that's already something that we're already doing, is we're serving people of all genders regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation.
Right.
So we're already doing that. That is required by the feds and by the state. And it's good practice. The other thing that we're doing is that we're facing some of the challenges, 30 years after the beginning of the shelter movement, of what are the challenges of communal living-based shelters. And there are a lot of challenges. And one of them is that it can be really hard to have a lot of diverse people in the same place. A lot of times it just is very difficult to make that work. And we don't screen people out. If people have a hard time dealing with somebody who's of a gender identity or a sexual orientation that they're not used to, we try to help them figure out how to make that work for them for the next 24 hours.
Correct.
Because we're welcoming everybody.
We're welcoming everybody. This is a place where, and if you're on the fence of, and I'm not saying that it's all old school to everybody. This is kind of a new thing for some folks. They just haven't experienced it yet. And so I think that we can require more conversation between us.
So you're available to talk to people afterwards?
Totally, because it's new to some people.
Yeah.
So definitely having that conversation, and especially on an intake, once someone's in your program and then you have that conversation, you can learn more about what their needs are and how you can best serve them.
Okay, so, and somebody wrote in that says, after screening, we state, this house shelters all individuals who identify as women and their children. This includes heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transgender women, as well as non-binary and gender non-conforming folks. People who are in transition or who are assigned male at birth and may not fit your expectations of what a female person looks like. That's very interesting.
Good.
Thanks for sharing that.
That's really good.
Thanks for sharing that.
That's great language. And that right there, maybe at some point we'll have to send that on to folks, because that's actually great language. And sometimes, I remember when I was in the shelter and we were looking at our forms, sometimes we just didn't have the language. We didn't know what to say in our forms.
So we're trying to avoid the use of terms like women and say folks or people, survivors.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So just shifting topics,
if
we can. So somebody else wrote in and said, our screening takes 20 minutes. but it's not really a screening. It's more of doing a safety plan that we're doing, and that might lead to shelter if needed.
That's awesome.
And then somebody else had a really great question about how to balance, sorry, let me look for this one. This is your pause moment. Okay, some people have said, can you send us the language that you just read? Yeah, so can you send that in the follow-up email?
Yes.
Okay, and there's another question, but maybe we could keep going and get back to the,
yes.
I need to find that question.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So shelter, I can find it.
Okay. Okay, so the shelter intake form, we're going to go on here because we've got a little bit of time left. So here you see the shelter intake form, and this is just the beginning of the form. Again, this goes along with the guidelines, so the guidelines will walk you through this. I think one of the things that I wanted people to be, the reason why I put like these arrows at the top is introduction and overview of your program, getting to know you better. We want to do our best to support you. And I think all programs, it doesn't have to look just like this, but all programs should sort of have a process in how you connect with each person that's coming to your program. If you're all on the same page, the flow just moves a lot better. Everyone is on the same page, you're doing the same thing. Each advocate is sort of following a process. So if each advocate is following the introduction overview of your program. So for example, this is the intake. The person has arrived and you're going to be doing the intake form. Again, you don't have to do the intake form on the first day. It could be the second day. It could be the third day. But at some point, you're probably going to do an intake. And my suggestion, and I think we kind of talked about this earlier, was when someone arrives, you probably want to take them around and show them your program. It really shouldn't be about, hey, come in my office, let's sit down and do some paperwork. It should be, I'm so glad you arrived. Let me show you around so you feel comfortable and show you where everything's at. And let's just walk around this program and I'll give you a tour. That's kind of just saying, I want you to feel comfortable before we get to some questions, or I want you to feel comfortable in case you might need something to eat or a glass of water. You might need something, and let's figure out how to make you as comfortable as possible. If you're going to do the intake, you can share with them. Now's the time we're going to get to know you better. This is the opportunity that we have so we can build a connection. I can learn what your needs are. I can figure out how we're going to best serve you. And I just want to learn a little bit more about you so that we can provide the resources that you're looking for. Our goal is really that we want to do our best to support you. And then, at the end, you can also talk about, let me tell you a little bit more about our program, who we are and what we offer. So it's really about supporting them in the end. Remember, you want to check in with folks to see if they need a break and check on, you want to know if they bring kids with them. I think that's important to get their kids settled before you start doing any paperwork. Also, that's something that you want to think about. If you're talking to them on the phone prior to them coming in and they tell you that they're bringing children with them or pets with them or whatever it might be, you're prepared for that upon their arrival. It shouldn't be a surprise. So in the guidelines, I think here's your flow. This is sort of walking you through that intake process. I know it says name, date, if you had an interpreter, what's the cell phone, yada, yada. I think that information is really important. You want to get that information because most of our funders want that anyway, right? And also, too, it doesn't have to be the first information you get. Remember, some information will be collected later. Always familiarize yourself with this information before you sit down with someone. You shouldn't have to read off these forms verbatim. You should get comfortable with them. And folks should feel some sort of connection, not that you're just reading off of a list. So, and try not to repeat the same questions that were asked on the screening. So if you feel like some of these questions are repeat questions, because sometimes they are, go back to the screening and already transfer that information so you're not asking the same questions twice.
Hey, Dee, I want to just go back to something I heard you just say. You said name, date, an interpreter if there is one, their cell phone number, address, date of birth, and then you also said our funders want this information.
sometimes our funders do want that information, and sometimes they ask for it. The interesting thing is you can go back and find out, actually, do you have to provide some of that information? You can, again, negotiate whether or not that's information.
Because we're not providing most of that information.
Right.
Right. Because we're doing non-identifying,
right,
non-personally identifying information because of.
I'll tell you what funders want. They want to know the city.
Yeah.
They want to know the zip code.
Yeah.
That's what funders generally want.
Yeah.
They don't really want to know your birthday. They don't want to know your first name or last name. They just really want to know.
Yeah, because we wouldn't provide that anyway,
no,
right? Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Right. And the other thing that's, I think, important to us in our programs is whether or not the interpreters. Because what I found is that if my interpreter requests increased, that means I need to actually go back and ask for more money in the budget for interpreters for the next year, because I might need more money to hire interpreters, right?
That's so great. Or bilingual staff.
Correct. Oh, yes. Yes. Hey. So tips for intakes, shelter or non-residential. So know your forms pretty much by heart. If they're that long, then that's something that you should think about. Getting familiar with your forms, just know them whenever possible before you begin the paperwork. Take the participants around, show them where they are. Also, too, you can show them your forms. It shouldn't be a secret. These forms should not be a secret. They should be able to see them, read them, or request them if they want them. There shouldn't be any secrets here. Remember, again, it's important to take breaks. You want people to feel like you're not just questioning them for an hour or two. If they need to smoke, if they need to walk to the store and get a Pepsi, if they need to check on their children or cook for their children, or maybe they're just like, you know what, I really need a break and I need to stop for a while. That could be a 15-minute break, or it could be an hour, or it could be, hey, can we take this up again tomorrow? So recognizing folks' capacity,
so that's trauma-informed, right?
Right. Recognizing their capacity. So when they arrive, you want to be aware of, okay, what did they experience prior to coming here? Do they need some time to be alone? Do they need some time to eat, or just, relax?
Take a shower.
Take a shower. Take a shower.
And and then also a lot of times people do need to take a smoke break.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I used to try to smoke at the shelter because it was the best way to connect with folks. I was the worst smoker. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, literally, I was wasting folks' cigarettes, but because I always had to bum one because I didn't buy them, right? So I literally would go out and be like, oh, I'll smoke with you, and I would coughing, and then I got to the point where I hated the smell, so I would wear a rubber glove, and I would go out and smoke with you. But I'm telling you, you build connection. Now, I'm not telling folks to go out and smoke cigarettes, by all means. But this was kind of back in the day, because we could actually, at one point, smoke in the shelter. You remember that? That's how old I am. We could actually smoke in the shelter, right? And then we moved it outside.
People relax. That's the whole thing, is that people do relax.
Right.
And
and you can talk with people freely.
And also, just for me, monitoring when people do need to go have a cigarette. Sometimes it's just because they need to smoke, but other times it's because something's come up that's very stressful.
Right. And
then that's a signal for me.
Right.
Of
right,
something's happening here, and I'm not going to push, but I'm curious.
I remember one woman, it was in the morning, and I brought up the Pepsi thing, and she wanted a Pepsi, and I was like, it's morning. And I remember this one woman said to me, what's the difference between a Pepsi and a cup of coffee? And I was like, so true, so true. So I was like, let's get everyone Pepsis, right? It's well, it's an option, right? And who am I to judge whether it's a Pepsi or a cup of coffee? So just thinking about what people need and helping them meet their needs.
Yeah, Amy just wrote in and said, I've done some of my best advocacy in the smoking area. And the other Amy, we're going to get to this whole thing about multiple same first names, Amy and Amy. Amy Volts said, I totally agree. Some of the best conversations happen after business hours when folks are hanging out in the backyard.
Yep.
Yeah, or watching their kids.
Totally.
Right? Those are great conversations. And this makes me think about Patty Bland and her midnight AA group, right? At the shelter that she would do. She'd say that's when people who couldn't sleep. And one of the things we know is that a lot of times people who have dealt with a lot of sexual violence and unwanted sex in their relationships, night is hard for folks.
Yeah.
Nighttime is hard. And having someone, if you do run a residential program, having someone who's hanging out at midnight to 2 a.m. is a great time to connect with people,
right,
who are afraid to go to sleep.
Right. And keep in mind, it should be a conversation, not a checklist. So, which can make folks feel really uncomfortable. So, completing all forms as quickly as possible. Again, it's not, you can, or you can wait till the next day. It's not about, let me do this really fast. It's about just connecting with folks. It's not about checking every box. It's not about collecting a lot of information. Again, too much information gathering and probing questions gets in the way of building trust. And sometimes I think, believe it or not, we gather way too much information and we don't use it. And I remember at our old program, I used to think, gosh, we have all this information, and what were we doing with it? And it actually was quite frustrating because we weren't doing anything with it. And so you might want to consider, you know, how do you collect this data, or do you not want to collect it? It might not be that important to you.
You know, Beatrice Arakawa just wrote in and said, actually, we should not be asking date of birth. We should only ask the year of birth.
Correct.
Okay, so thanks, Beatrice, for pointing that out.
Correct. You don't need to know the date. You can just know the year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I never give my correct year. I always give it a little off because I don't want people to be able to track me down.
Right.
Right.
And remember,
I'm born in 1970. That's what I tell people.
And remember, we're the ones who hold a lot of power. We're the ones in the program that, you know, make the decisions, and folks know that. So they're going to kind of follow our lead. So if we're asking lots of questions, they're going to answer a lot of questions for us. So remember, we have that power. All right. Tips for helping survivors share their story. So the next set of questions is about sharing what, you know, brought you to our program. So that's kind of how you could start a conversation, or kind of go into the next steps of the conversation. I think it's important. The reason why we bring this up is in the process of me doing the intake form and the guidelines, to me it's important that you recognize that the questions shift. They might shift from where were you living, tell me what brought you to our program today, to can you tell me if you used in the last 24 hours. So, you know, you want to...
How often have you used drugs and alcohol in the last 24 hours?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Have your children witnessed abuse? So you want...
Those are tough questions.
Those are very tough questions, and you want people to know that you're about to transition into a different set of questions. They might be questions that can bring up emotions and feelings. This might be a good time that you say, do you want to take a break before we go into these questions? So I think it's important for us to be realistic in letting people know sort of the transition of questions, because we do ask some pretty invasive questions that get to some of their core feelings and vulnerability, right? So, and when we're asking people to be vulnerable by sharing their personal information, they should be able to feel comfortable when they're sharing that information. So we have to give them the guidance of what that looks like and what that feels like. So when we say, do you want to take a break? Do you want to do this at a different time? Do you want to get something to drink or eat? But I just want to be clear that we're going to transition to a different set of questions.
That's awesome, because this is about the gift of time and space.
Right.
Right.
Right, and remember, folks don't have to answer the question, so you should be able to offer that up as an option to say, if at any time you don't want to answer a question, feel free to not answer the question.
That's a good point. Sonoy just wrote in and said, our best conversations actually come during transportation time. So especially if you're in a rural area, where you're driving people from one place to the other, maybe in the car for an hour, that's a great time to have really casual but deep conversation with people.
So this next slide is really non-residential DV.
So we're shifting gears.
We're shifting gears here. And but kind of not. We're still talking about forms. We're talking about how to use the forms. And this is really for programs that are not screening folks into a shelter. But you're still assessing the level of danger. And that could look different. And being aware, like, what's happening with the caller? Are they calling the right number? Maybe they wanted to call and get sheltering. Maybe they wanted something else. So just assessing what the needs are and what the level of danger is. And then I kind of did this diagram, because a lot of times in our programs where we're not the shelter program, we're trying to figure out what's the best need. And maybe that caller is in immediate danger and they need you to assist them in calling 911. Maybe not. Maybe they want to come to your program and go to a support group, or they want to get children's services, or they want to see a legal advocate. So just figuring out which direction that call is going to go, and then what's going to be your next step. So are you going to link them to other services in your community, or are you going to bring them into your program and link them to the advocate that's going to be able to support them? Making sure you're taking clear notes, so that, you know, if you're not the person who's going to do the intake with this caller, that they know exactly what was going on with that caller when they called. You want to be clear about what information that was passed on to you. So I made sure I put a box there that assists you in taking information. Now, when I was doing this, I noticed that lots of folks had huge areas for dialogue and like note-taking. And honestly, I think we don't need a lot of information. You just need to know really what prompted the person to call that day and what was going on with
them. So remember, you know, to just, as we always think about with advocacy, is that being thoughtful about how much we write down is important, and we try, because we know that our records, even though there's something called legal privilege in Washington State for advocates, we know that we are still getting subpoenas, that many of you are getting subpoenas and getting, trying to, the abusers or other players in the system trying to get access to our notes. So we're very careful about what we write down.
Good point, Judy.
And then so these forms, these non-residential screening forms and intake forms, these are both for folks who work at a program that doesn't have any kind of facility, right?
Correct.
So like where I used to work, we had no housing or a shelter program. It was 100% community advocacy. And then where you used to work, there was a shelter and a community advocacy program. So this is meant for both.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And it could be, I mean, I was mentioning this to Judy the other day, that sometimes folks get funding, and that you're able to put folks in motels or hotels. And sometimes that funding comes, and sometimes it goes away. So what resources you have to offer could change from time to time, but still these screenings and intake forms can adjust to that and assist you with that. So this is, again, the guidelines to help you. So for every question that's on the screening, here are the questions, and then sort of here's how to assist with that. So one of the things that I was trying to point out with Judy is that this is a time for you to really listen to what the caller is talking about, and making sure that, because for me, what happens is in the program is, even though I did the screening, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be working with that person. Another advocate could be working with that person. So getting as much information as you can about what's happening, what prompted that caller to call that day, how you're going to have that conversation, what does that look like? So you could say, thank you for calling our program. How can we assist you? Can you please describe your situation and what prompted you to call our program? So you could just say that. It could look a little different if you want, but remember to thank the caller for reaching out to you. Thank them for thinking of calling you, and that you're here to support them the best that you can. While you're listening to the caller, you should be able to assess the level of danger. And that's really like just listening. So again, I think we talked about this earlier. Is the abuser in the background yelling? The caller is whispering? And the reason why some of this information is repeated is it doesn't matter if they call our shelter program or our non-residential program. Sometimes the call is very similar, right? So it doesn't mean they're in less danger because they call our non-residential program. It just means that's the number that they dialed at the moment, and we've got to be able to figure out how to assist that person. The non-residential intake form, it looks very similar. Again, introductions and overview of your program. Again, you might want to walk someone around, show them your program. Your goal is really to get to know them better, and you want to do the best to support them. And again, you might use these same boxes, but you might want to put something different in the boxes. This was my generic thought of how a process could work and what that could look like. But again, if every advocate is following that sort of that process, you're all doing the same thing. Your goal for this individual person is the same. Okay. So, and here are the guidelines for the intake. So as you can see, it kind of just repeats itself. So for every screening, there's a guideline. For every intake, there's a guideline. So each form just kind of gets you to the next thing. One of the things that Judy and I were talking about, and I thought this was important, and it says last name. And it could be last initial. But in my program, oftentimes we had many folks with the same name.
Just like we have on this call. We have Amy and Amy.
Right. And so our community program served hundreds, right, where our shelter didn't serve me. But we had so many Jennifers and so many Lisas, and you want to make sure that when Lisa shows up, it's the right Lisa on your caseload, because if that person comes into your office, you don't want to say, well, you know, last time we talked, this is what you said to me, and you don't want Lisa to look at you and say, I did not say that, because you have the wrong Lisa. So again, I know some information may not seem important, but it is important to have identifying information so that you in your program can know who you're working with, because many people have the same name. And I think whoever brought up the year of birth is also key. I think that's a thing that you can
or
use.
even the,
and
program, the program ID.
Yep, the program ID is helpful. So have you ever made a call after giving your, so this is the thing. I guess what I really want to say about this is, when folks call our programs, you just kind of want to have an opening statement. Hi, this is so-and-so, this is a domestic violence program, and I'm sure all of you have done this before, where you've called somewhere and they said to you, after you told them your whole story, they said to you, I'm sorry, you've actually told me all your information, but I'm not the person you should talk to. That is so extremely frustrating. So I always say it's important to just say to folks when they call, thanks for calling so-and-so program. This is a program that serves blah, 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 blah. How can I help you? Can you tell me what's going on today? So that they are sure that they've called the right program. And then you can kind of engage with that person. But it's really hard when folks tell all their information and you're not the right person that they're calling. So just be mindful that our phone numbers are given out to many, many folks, and we don't know who's calling our program.
So we just have a few more slides, and then we're going to get to a lot more great questions that you have.
Yep. So basically, it's really not about an interrogation. This is a living document, and you can tell the forms and guidelines to your community needs. You know, as the slide says, resist the temptation and pressure to add more. Please resist the temptation to add more. Our role as advocates is to support, not question people. I think it's just important that we're supporting folks where they are, meeting them where they are, meeting their needs. And collecting information really shouldn't drive us. It should just be a small part of the process. So keep in mind, sometimes less is better. Conversation carries way more weight, and connecting with folks, I think, is important. And remember, these are living documents, so even though I created them, at some point after having conversation with some of you, after having conversations with some of the programs that I'm going to be with, I might want to change a few things. I might add a few things, or I might take some things away. But really what I wanted to emphasize here is that it should be survivor-driven. Our form should be survivor-driven. Our work should be survivor-driven. It is not about our program and what's most important and how we get all the questions we want answered. It's really about providing services to our survivors.
And thank you for all the important work that you do.
So now, if you have questions, we want you to ask more questions. Type away, ask us some questions. Do we already have some questions?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so we have some questions, so please feel free to type in your questions.
Okay, we have some great ones, Dee. One of them is it legal to ask someone, how did you come to this country? So an advocate was saying that a survivor was asked this at DSHS the other day at the TANF office, I think, and I can tell you what my response is that I don't know the answer about if that's legal. I do know that DSHS workers are very scripted. What I mean is that they have a list of questions that they are allowed to ask, and there are a lot of things they are not allowed to ask because of the practice guidelines. There's something called the DSHS Social Workers Practice Guidelines that WSCADV actually, and our former coworker, Margaret Hobart, spent a lot of time working with DSHS to develop, and that those are the approved questions that DSHS workers are allowed to ask. I do not remember this question, how did you come to this country, being on that list. So we will find out, and we will follow up with you. And I didn't catch who that question was from, so if you could please type in your name and contact information, then that will help us follow up with you. And thank you for asking this very important question.
If you're unable to do that, you can also contact me here at the Coalition with your question by sending me an email, and my email will pop up in a few minutes.
Great, thanks, Dee. Okay, here's another question, back to what you were just saying about survivor-driven advocacy. So this is a really great question. There's a tension sometimes between being survivor-driven and trying to meet survivors where they are, and then balancing their needs with the needs of other participants, especially if they're all staying in the same facility. So how do you balance that between being driven by what a particular survivor needs, especially if they have a lot of needs, and what other people in the facility need too?
Well, I think, well,
this never happens, right?
Right. I mean, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. But one of the things is keep in mind, one, you shouldn't have to be solving this alone. Really, this is a team effort. The folks you work with when you're meeting, you should have these conversations about how do we balance that out? What does that look like? And how can we make sure that folks are still comfortable in our program? You're not going to meet everyone's individual needs. You just can't. I mean, it doesn't work that way, right? So, I mean, in the best worlds, if all my needs were met in my life, oh boy, I would be super happy, right? But our programs are not designed to help everyone with every single thing. So I think for me, being clear with folks when they come in, or whether they've been there a week or two, to go back over, I want to just share with you what our program provides again, and let you know, here are some things that we are unable to provide, but we can provide you resources or information on how to link you to those resources. That might be an option, but again, you can't provide everything for everyone all the time.
Well, I'm thinking, Deidre, about the shelter rules training that you do, and remember the scenario about the woman who kept going into other people's rooms, and like touching their things.
Good. That's
and they were about to exit her because she kept going into other people's rooms, and they would say, like, we've gone over this before, you can't be doing that.
Right.
So what was going on there for her?
So that's so great. Great prompt, Judy. So what I talk about in that process is figuring out what are the real needs.
Oh, okay.
What are the participants' real needs? What is going on with this person? Are we asking the right questions? And so the person who was going in and out of other people's rooms was just that they couldn't remember which room was their room because all the doors looked the same, and they had some mental health, right? So,
or maybe a brain injury.
It could be a brain injury,
battering.
Right? But they couldn't remember. Part of the problem was every door looked the same.
Oh, like at a hospital.
Right. So how could we make it so that this was individualized to this person's needs so they can remember my door has X on it, or a picture that they drew, or something that was important to them, and we put it on the door so that it would become familiar. But really what it was about was uncovering what that person really needed, not assuming that this person is just going into other people's rooms and maybe they're stealing something we don't know. Don't make assumptions. Just ask questions. Just get to know what really is going on for that person. And it might take a little bit of time, and it could take a different advocate. Like some folks just open up to a different person than the original advocate that they met. So identifying folks' level of comfort, I think, is important.
It just makes me think about the survivor who doesn't take a shower, right? And then it turns out, like, well, she's a lot of good reasons for not wanting to take a shower, because we know that's, a lot of times people are assaulted in the bathroom. So, but like how many times have we gotten to the point of like, man, she's got to take a shower, people. And so figuring out how to work with folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just say, so we see this is an area for you that's really challenging. Can you share more about why this is challenging for you?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's another great question. Well, all the questions are great, but here's one that's really speaking to me. Is it discriminatory? Is it discrimination to ask if someone is using drugs or alcohol or if they have a mental disability? Doesn't that come across like that we're going to discriminate against them?
Well, one, it depends on when you ask the question.
Oh.
And two, it depends on how you ask the question. So, and three, it depends on what's your intent. So if your intent is to approach and to sort of pick apart to prove that you're right, that this person's got some stuff going on, you might want to think about that. Because where is that coming from? Why do you want to know these questions? So what is that about? And how is it going to help you? So if the person says, well, yeah, I'm using, well, what are you going to do? So if they say yes, you got to be prepared for that response, right? So my first thing is think about what you're going to ask and why. What's your intent? What do you hope to uncover, and what do you plan to do with it once they've given you information? And what do you plan to do if they actually lie to you? Because that's okay, right? I think it's okay to lie. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so the other thing is your approach. I mean, why are you asking the question? Did something happen? Was there a problem? What is your concern? You can start out the conversation as, I have a concern and I want to bring this to your attention. Can we have a conversation about this? I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to have a conversation and see if you have any insight.
So that would be like when when the participant is already coming to services.
Correct.
But what about in screening? Do you ask this question?
No.
So you don't ask questions about, are you using drugs or alcohol, or do you have any mental disabilities in screening?
No, you can say on the phone, our program serves folks who have, might have some, who have been using or, and that might be a concern for you, but we can have that conversation later. But you also have to know that you are able to serve that person. So if you have no resources to help folks with drugs and alcohol or mental health, your program has to determine how you're going to help that person once they arrive, because they should not be screened out for those reasons.
Okay. So then, so that's really helpful, so that we don't ask these questions at screening, because that's just going to screen people out.
Correct.
And get them all worried. And then also when we're doing intake, we can't ask these questions, but this is not like coming right off the bat. Of like name, rank, serial number, and are you using? Right.
Because you can say on the screening, you could say, we ask that when you arrive to our program, you come as clean and sober as possible if you have a concern, because people do show up high. People do show up intoxicated. It doesn't mean that you should turn them away. It just means you have to figure out now how you're going to support this person who's intoxicated or extremely high.
So I loved, you told me before how you used to do it when someone would come, they were coming for the first time.
Yeah.
And they were actually too intoxicated to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or like the kind of conversation you want to have at intake.
Right.
So how did you handle that?
You just figure out ways to support them. So are you hungry? Do you want to take a bath? Do you want to go to bed?
Yes.
Right.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Do you want to take a walk? Do you, like figure out how you can buy some time to get them to come down before you start having a conversation.
So you can do intake later.
You can do intake later, and approaching them in a way that starts a confrontation is not the best approach. Yeah. So you really want to just comment. I mean, like
that's so helpful. It's approaching the conversation. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So it's not a confrontation.
Correct. You don't want to start a conversation.
That's awesome.
Because really, I mean, if your services support folks who are using, you'll get to that, right? They're gonna come down after some point. They're not gonna be intoxicated for days. They're going to come down, and then you can have that conversation with them. I mean, to me, the thing is that everyone needs a service, and all you're doing is saying, this is what we provide. Now, it's the approach. It's how you approach the conversation, I think, is key.
That's super helpful because, yeah, I mean, Patty Bland used to say at least 30% of the people that we're working with are using.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess another thing that I was going to say is on your screening, you just want to be clear that you serve folks that are using or could be experiencing mental health, and that's okay. And that you serve other people as well.
Well, I just want to be honest. This is always a hard one for me. So if I wanted to do some role plays and get some help from you, is that something that you do?
Yes. And I honestly think that role plays can ease the tension and the stress around how to have these conversations.
Okay.
Because the more prepared you are for it, the better you are, the better it is for the survivor, right? So just, I mean, really, honestly, all my role plays that I've done in the past have either come from my experience or other people sending their questions to me saying, what am I supposed to do with this person in my program? And then I just use those as my role plays. So I take those to my trainings and we do them in role plays, and it actually really helps. So if you're not doing role plays in your monthly meetings, you should start. You should practice
with coworkers.
With coworkers, yeah, because it's really helpful. And the thing is, like, we don't always have the right answer right at the right moment. We do make mistakes. I've made mistakes in the past, but that's why we're here. We're trying to learn how to avoid making lots of mistakes. We're trying to figure out how to get folks to feel comfortable in our programs and be survivor-centered when we do our work, right?
Awesome. So help is available. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so I am going to actually go to a couple of programs and do some on-site visits. And if you're interested in having me come out and do a site visit, I would like for you to send me an email. And as you can see on the screen, my email is up there. And please talk with your manager, ask your supervisor, send me an email, describe what you need. For example, like, how to simplify or revise our forms. Like, I really like to talk about forms, and then how to get the questions so that we can ask them in a way that helps us feel comfortable and other people feel comfortable. But send me an email, send me your thoughts, and I would love to come to a couple of programs and do some TA with you.
Great. So people, so you are hoping to do 3 visits before the end of June. Is that right, Dee?
Yes. And did the Maui people request me? Because that one's really important.
That'd be nice. And then it sounds like you're also would be available to go maybe after June.
Yes. So kind of my plan is that maybe I'll do like a regional visit, and then we can bring more programs together, because really it's about discussion. Like, this is a living document. This is something that's probably going to change a little bit, but not adding more to it, but just really changing it so that it accommodates each program. Because as we know, all programs are not the same. They sort of operate differently. They provide different services. So it's really about adapting it to your program and making it work for you. And that's kind of what I want to help you do. Again, you can reach me here at the Coalition. Send me an email if you want me to come out to your program, or you just have some questions for me. Let me know if you actually were able to download the documents. If not, we can
we send those out to everybody?
We can, yes, or they can go online and get them. So that actually might be helpful. And let me know if you have other questions. So again, we're at the end of our webinar. So if you have any other questions, please. It says come to Maui. I'd love to. Please. We've got just about 5 more minutes, so let me know if you have any questions. And make sure you fill out your evaluation at the end. It'll pop up. And WSCADV wants to know what you want support with to help you improve your screening and intake practices. So please complete the evaluation after this webinar and share your thoughts with us. So we just want to know how we can help you.
So here's the thing. We had 200 people sign up for this webinar, and that is telling us that people really, really want help on this topic, and we just need we need more guidance from you. We're asking you to tell us what could the Coalition do to help you with screening and intake, and you know, what could we do better on? We really are hoping to get guidance from all of you.
Right. That's yes. So fear not. Write in any questions. No question is too hard or too difficult or too crazy, because believe me, I've worked in the shelter long enough to have seen it all. I've heard it all. I've been there, done that. The stories I could tell, right?
and that you all could tell too.
Right. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And it says, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And we appreciate you registering for this webinar. And I'm sure I'll be doing more throughout the year and some in person. So please sign up and come to the trainings.
Thank you. And hope to see you at the Refuse to Abuse 5K on July 15th and at the WSCADV conference in Yakima on September 24th, 26th, 25th, 26th, and 27th. Looking forward to seeing you, and thank you for all the extraordinary work that you do every day.
All right, thanks, folks.
Now what do I do?